Dear supporters of international campaign Liberate Bach, and all progressive forces who support Bach's visionary cause of brain advancement through music. I am Rosalina Gutman, and this video is driven by my duty of internationally recognized music educator, multidisciplinary scholar, and presenter at international events, and grateful advocate for the legacy of Johann Sebastian Bach that had been inherited from past generations, with a number of politically correct distortions about visionary and uncommon for his historical period endeavors of genius composer and master music educator with neuroscientist's mindset. In my other presentations on this subject, and in my ebook titled Paradox of Invisible Dissonance in Fugue Parody by J.S. Bach, I went into details of my rediscovery of the true humorous meaning of this piece and still innovative lessons from this incredibly precious didactic exercise with multi-purpose applications. During Bach's time, his visionary innovations in heart-centered pedagogy were contrary to the culture of moral atrocity that provided sustainability for monarchy regime on subliminal level. That is why Bach's artistic rebellion took a lot of courage and risk as well as personal sacrifice, because it demonstrated the absurdity of collective blind spot of supporting social construct that was harmful for the very human nature. And this tiny jewel reveals Bach's pedagogical approach that embodied today's aspirations for using music as developmental and transformative tool. However, such meaning notated in his compositions for teaching in masterful way had to be rediscovered. And my process of unearthing this aspect from distortive dogma could manifest under very unusual circumstances. In fact, it happened because of pressure that was from my heartache to accommodate it and to soothe it. Paradoxically, silver lining of excruciating heartache manifested into my need to use music as the applied instrument to mediate heartache. That problem was due to left unresolved women's heart attack. This happened when everything in my life failed. And when I say everything, I mean it. There was no gender-specific research on women's hearts. And I was more knowledgeable than most of the medical professionals who had no idea about this diagnosis that I was fortunate to learn about from the very important stream of information that began spreading throughout the globe from Barbara Streisand Women's Heart Institute, co-founded with another visionary of our time, Dr. Barry Mertz. The unending hostility towards unsuspecting patients with under-researched life-threatening condition constantly added enormous amount of suffering, in addition to often reappearing heartache, but it allowed me to notice that cognitive dissonance was harmful for health because it was accompanied with resurgence of heartache from my heart that had become much more sensitive. And part of that was my observations of recurring pain that accompanied emotional repression in Bach. And contrary, the heartache would lessen when I would give myself permission to play Bach like any other music from my repertoire, naturally, without emotional repression. I decided to mention these details in this video that speaks of this experience in the very brief format, in the abstract or summary that I'm about to read out loud, that is limited by only 400 words, which accompanies paper that I am presenting, and it has very unexpected subject. Legal duty to report child-endangering emotional repression imposed upon piano performers of Johann Sebastian Bach. Both this abstract and following paper are limited to the short size, where it is impossible to list all the events and important details related to the involved pursuit of mine for this subject, which is literally very close to my heart. I mention my effort to present this issue to the attention of elected authorities in global leadership for music education in 2022 for the first time at the Research Commission International Seminar held in advance to 35th World Conference for International Society for Music Education, or ISME. And my both presentations mentioned issues of observed global crisis of music education caused by imposed emotional repression on millions of musicians through false and injurious exam standards. However, instead of expected response with related solutions to the understood by everyone problem, I was subjected to cyberbullying and other hate crimes by similarly respectable individuals with official academic titles in the positions of elected leadership or appointed leadership. For example, when I posted a copy of archival record of sales receipts signed by Bach, and along with that, it listed details of his sales transaction of emerging hammer clavier called pianoforte that had been underpublicized and unknown to most of musicians. Pianoforte means that this instrument was based on similar action capable of nuanced dynamics similar to today's pianos. I expected to have exchange on this subject among my colleagues on this quite sensational and unknown to most of musicians document, but instead, administrator of the page for related group, Leon de Bruyn, did just the contrary thing when he could not defend his argument that he posted conflicting with my opinion that was about different performers. We simply did not agree on our preferences of performers of Bach's music. Well, he suddenly took down my post with attached thread that involved other replies from other musicians, other colleagues of mine, music educators. But before he took it down, he posted for maybe 30 seconds the reason for that, announcing that he acted based on some sort of collective opinion that disproved my views about Bach, which differed from official publications based on score facts that I had to rediscover. He did not explain anything about his unethical act of preventing free flow of academic exchange. If some group opposed my opinion, maybe some other group would be in favor of that, but he prevented the mere opportunity to find out the truth through sorting out our arguments. Later on, similar acts of shutting down my profile and even mere access to discussion group for issues related to health and wellness of musicians suddenly took place without any explanation as well. And even more frustrating was the lack of any acknowledgement of my complaints about these problems by the top elected leadership that simply dismissed my suffering from these human rights violations of free speech and violations of ethics of our organization. No one bothered to make any comments and explain anything about these power abuses. Instead, not only no resolution came in response, but another outstanding bylaws violation manifested my profile for the main website was suddenly hidden from public access. Again, none of that was explained in any way. Nothing was listed as the reason for such act of violation of rules of this organization. And instead, contrary things should have happened based on my information that I provided. That is quite rare. It's not common to find individuals who would share their personal health information for the purpose of resolving common issues of global significance. But that's what my teacher's obligation dictated for me. A few other frustrating things took place, and they culminated in the very, very frustrating event as well. That was brief exchange in February 2025 on the subject that I brought up during questions and answers to the elected acting president of this global organization, who is in charge of overseeing educational policy on behalf of all members of this organization. And she, unlike the rest of leadership members, she has special degree in music psychology that allows this person to understand very well all the details and all the nuances of involved problems. And her opinion should be valued because of her professional expertise. But something else happened instead, as I understood. Although she did not apologize for dismissal of my earlier complaints about the subject of this global significance and personal importance for me, she did say very briefly, though, that she would have acted differently, but under collective pressure, her actions had to be contrary to what she would wish them to be. She versed it in her own personal way, but that's what she stated. However, not long after the live event, the recording of this Zoom broadcast was posted on YouTube channel. But this answer by the president was surprisingly cut out. So those members who would want to know what actually took place during this official broadcast would have very distorted sense of its actual proceedings. And it is unclear who and why was behind such misleading games, taking quite a lot of risk to post altered content, while knowing that the original broadcast could be easily recorded by any participants. This information could not fit into abstract or paper, but it helps to understand what prompted me to submit the response that I am about to read the summary of it. And the main purpose, in addition to this background information, the main purpose of reading this abstract out loud is to communicate the felt sense of suffering that has been invested into this abbreviated text written under constraints of limiting size. And afterwards, I may unpack a few more details to add a little more clarity to very important issues that touch millions of musicians who had been the subject of significant psychological impact, damaging their mental and physical health, according to research on emotional repression. And it is usually not simple to grasp because entrainment of emotional repression in performance of Bach's music often took place during childhood, and therefore it is filed in our unconscious mind in the so-called category that is usually hard to grasp, called childhood developmental trauma. So this information is actually really critical to know in order to be able to address it. So without further ado, here's the abstract. institutional health and wellness compliance of educational policy to voluminous data that link emotional repression with serious mental and physical illnesses is non-negotiable, non-elective duty of authority. And law encourages urgency by granting teachers immunity for reporting child-endangering psychological damage to prevent serious legal responsibility for extending suffering by willful neglect. Such urgency of health compliance of exam requirement is made obvious through factual evidence that illuminated undeniable emotional hazard. In fact, examination of perception paradox of collective blind spot over Bach's fugue parody revealed significant discrepancy of many didactic aids for teaching Bach with score facts of dissonance, demanding to address evident global crisis of shared profound cognitive failure, and required by exams emotional repression is its root cause. No child may be subjected to such cognitive injury by emotional repression for an additional day. My pain-informed emotional reawakening from paradoxically internalized affliction by collective blind spot allowed for grasping dissonance earlier missed in plain sight. Rebel Bach defiantly employed banned by dogmatic rules cluster chords, tritones, undeterred by their name, devil's intervals, leaving them without expected resolution, using sonic pyrotechnics to embolden them even more with rhythmic stress of syncopation that now is commonly used in jazz style, but require dogmatic rules of imposed by exam historically informed performance standard in trained emotional repression pattern, making impossible mere consideration of dynamic stress for performers, essential for making dissonance clear. Eureka! The thief that stole enjoyment of laughter, intended by Bach to draw genuine love for polyphony studies without nagging for practice, is called emotional repression. Bach's self-rewarding design of his musical joke based on intuitive violation of musical predictions remains stellar didactic achievement, lost among many generations of music students. Bach's masterful use of sonic surprise for crafting musical humor metaphor made this exercise fun and even addictive to repeat in order to master skills for creating emotional resonance with using nuanced dynamics as colors of sonic palette, essential for teaching self-reflection, for achieving emotional liberation. Modern law stipulates teachers' duty to report such thieves as emotional repression, thus mandating for institutional compliance by denouncing archaic child-endangering unlawful practice rooted in culture of subliminal indoctrination of all subjects of monarchy into submission. After I announced observed link of my heartache and emotional repression in my earlier PowerPoint presentation for ISME Research Commission in 2022, and in related poster abstract published in 35th World Conference of ISME Proceedings, serving as alarming example of related studies, and I cite them specifically. Lacking compliance is unjustifiable. Child-endangering cruelty unlawfully institutionalized into policy. This concludes my abstract reading, and I would like to add only just a few more details. The issues of health compliance affect indiscriminately everyone if they are not addressed, and if individuals in authority positions don't seem to understand this, such incredibly injurious blind spot reveals their state of profound self-defeat consciousness, as well as no capacity to recognize the harm of the global scale that their willful neglect causes to millions of unsuspecting students, including children, today as we speak, and tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and until they would wake up to the reality of this problem that is regulated today by modern law, unlike the time of Johann Sebastian Bach, making illegal such child-endangering power abuses, both by individuals and by groups of conspiring cronies, driven by senseless agenda with devastating impacts that I only briefly described before reading this abstract. I also would like to mention that this production is dedicated to somewhere close, coming up anniversary, somber anniversary of false retaliatory imprisonment of Johann Sebastian Bach on November the 6th, 1717. Genius musician with neuroscientist mindset, committed no crime, but had no funds to afford effective legal defense from human rights violations that he faced in response to refusal to submit to worsening against his visionary innovations, censorship, the power abuse in the form of creating false stigma of convict, set off lifelong witch hunt against visionary genius Bach that forced him into the least paying job of music educator that he could never change for better position relevant to his gift and his talent. After arriving to Leipzig and escaping from the place of life-threatening events. All that was at an affordable price to humanity. And our efforts to liberate his still innovative tools for advancing human mind through music are symbolic during our time when major assault on democratic foundations of our society have been threatened, And along with that, the existence of every member of humanity had been threatened as well. Bach was working with much risk on preserving free emotional expression for the sake of essential role it plays in clarity of vision of our reality. Emotional expression through music can be powerful in restoring interhemispheric balance of the brain, heart and brain balance, synchrony of conscious and unconscious mind. And these are essential elements of performance at higher human potential and performance at its peak. These conditions and these elements of our well-being and effective cognition are essential for formation and maintenance of integrative consciousness on personal and collective levels of humanity at large. Last but not the least, please subscribe to the newscast to learn more details and developments and to join important actions by camaraderie of dedicated fans of Bach. Check out other related videos as well. And also remember that you can learn more in-depth information about briefly covered subjects by downloading ebook in PDF format available on related website www.paradoxofinvisibledissonance.com www.paradoxofinvisibledissonance.com. Please share this information and alarming warning and invite other progressive forces to join our global cause that was initiated by visionary of all time, Johann Sebastian Bach. And thank you for paying forward. See you next time.